there is an acknowledgement not only of the charges, but I mean, I'll make the argument. It kind of seems like they're believing this. They're believing that he did this. Yes, he's innocent until proven guilty, but that's a pretty strong message. So Austin Forsyth, her husband, appears to write,
Hi.
Hey, I know that we
I'm.
just know that we can't talk about a lot
Yeah.
on here. Did Travis get a hold of you?
Yeah. I've been talking to Travis.
Oh, good, good.
I've got him as my attorney right now.
Okay.
I don't know if you know that. I
I
asked him to
wasn't.
be my attorney.
Yeah, I didn't know who exactly we settled with, but that's good. Good.
Well, it's not for you. It's only for me. I mean, he can work with you, but it's just
Okay.
they said I needed somebody
Okay.
for the case that we've got
Sure.
going
Sure.
with
Yep.
the kids and stuff.
Most people don't sit down and analyze every little detail when they follow a family online. You just watch, you listen, and you assume what you're seeing is pretty close to the full picture. That's exactly how it's been for years with the Duggars. But lately, things haven't felt as straightforward. And once you start paying attention, certain details begin to stand out in a way that's hard to ignore. Recently, a set of private communications surfaced, emails and messages exchanged while Joseph Duggar was being held in an Arkansas detention facility. These weren't public statements or carefully worded posts. These were personal conversations with his wife, family members, and people close to him, written during a time when he was facing extremely serious legal trouble. And what makes these messages so important isn't just what they say, but how they say it. At the time, Joseph was dealing with charges in two different states. In Florida, he was accused of serious offenses involving a minor, tied to an alleged incident during a family trip back in 2020. At the same time, there were additional charges in Arkansas involving both him and his wife, Kendra Duggar, reportedly connected to child endangerment and false imprisonment. While some of the details around those Arkansas charges remain unclear, what is known is that both cases were unfolding at the same time, putting enormous pressure on the entire family.
And it's just
Well,
they're
if
gonna
you'll
be.
tell Joy, thank you from me, and that I love her so much. She's she's just been amazing. Sounds like for you through all this. Just
Mhm.
I wanna be sure that you tell her specifically, and Mama, those two especially.
Okay.
I don't know who all else is involved. I know that
Oh,
everyone's probably jumping in.
the entire family. They all have their departments, basically, that they've been helping with. I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah.
it's like just these ones are working on the kids, these ones are working on me, these ones are working on the attorneys, these ones are working on business,
Wow.
I mean, it's just, I mean, the whole family, I think they just genuinely are like, we love you guys and are here for you. But
Wow.
they told me, they said, we don't want to make any decisions for you. They just said,
Hmm.
we're here to support you. And I've been struggling because I was like, I just need to know, what's going on in some regard. But I can't carry the load at all. And so Joy's like, yeah, she's like, if you ever feel uncomfortable and you don't want something, everyone's like, what is your take on this? These are so I've just been trying to, because I want to be able to take everything over and I want advice, but I don't, yeah, but I've
Hmm.
been, and I've been
Yeah.
struggling with,
Well,
yeah, like
well, that's
how much help.
oh, it's hard to receive help. I know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes.
it's like,
No, but
am I
you
sure?
need it. You need it.
I know.
Um.
Well, yeah, I was going to say that I feel like that um, I can't be, alone for too long either.
Yeah, and I think
And so,
that's what we were realizing actually right before all this broke out was that hey, we actually need to be around people because we've been away from people for so long. We just need that. So it
yeah,
was healthy for us to be around people, and so I think that's good that you're
yeah,
realizing that still.
What stands out immediately in these messages is the environment Joseph describes from inside the detention facility. In one of his emails, he talks about being in lockup for 23 to 24 hours a day, struggling even to type messages because of how limited the system is. He mentions missing his wife and children, trying to stay mentally strong, and relying heavily on faith to get through each day. On the surface, it reads like someone trying to cope with a difficult situation, but when you place it in the context of the charges he's facing, it adds a very different layer to the story. There's also a noticeable pattern in how communication is handled. Over and over again, family members remind each other not to discuss anything related to the legal case through calls or messages. That's not unusual, these systems are monitored, but the way it's emphasized suggests a strong awareness that anything said could be used later. It creates this constant tension in the conversations, where people are trying to support each other emotionally while carefully avoiding certain topics altogether. One message in particular from a close family member makes this even clearer. The tone is supportive, offering help, reassurance, even financial assistance. But at the same time, there's a direct warning that every call, every message is recorded and could end up in the hands of prosecutors. That kind of reminder changes how you read everything else, because it means what's being said is likely filtered, controlled, and possibly incomplete. And then there's the emotional side of it, especially in the exchanges between Joseph and Kendra. Their messages are filled with affection, encouragement, and religious references. He talks about reading scripture to stay strong, while she responds with support, even sending him lyrics from a song meant to comfort him. On one level, it reflects a couple trying to hold on to each other during a crisis, but on another level, it raises questions about how they're processing everything that's happening, especially given the seriousness of the accusations involved. At the same time, there's an undercurrent running through these conversations that's hard to ignore. Some family members speak in a way that suggests they already believe mistakes were made, focusing on forgiveness, faith, and moving forward rather than outright denial. Others emphasize support no matter what, stepping in to help with responsibilities outside, including caring for children and managing day-to-day life. It creates a situation where, instead of a unified narrative, you're seeing multiple perspectives unfolding at once. And when you step back and look at all of it together, the controlled communication, the emotional tone, the careful wording, and the context of the charges, it starts to paint a much more complicated picture than what's usually presented publicly. Nothing in these messages is loud or dramatic, but it's the quiet details, the things left unsaid, and the way people choose their words that begin to reveal just how serious and complex the situation really is.
Well, I know, and that was the thing, is my brain had to slow down because it was going too quick whenever I first got in here. It took a while for it to calm, and then I was like, well, you know what? I came to the realization, I was like, well, I'm here. I need to just embrace where God has me, and just serve where I am. You know, like Joseph. I read the story of Joseph, how he had to be where he was and embrace the situation and serve God.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I want you to stay encouraged. I don't.
Yeah.
I know, and I feel like I can't be there for as much for you right now.
No, that's fine.
So I know the Lord. Okay, because I have my own battles that I'm dealing with, and
Yes,
so
you have a lot of things you're doing, sweetie.
yeah. So I'm just like I just don't know. I feel like I've had to put you on the. I was trying to sort this out last night in my head, and I was like, I have my priorities are the kids,
Yes,
and
absolutely.
that's the only thing that I'm able to focus on. I mean, I'm gonna try to
Yes,
take your calls, but I have to do anything and everything for the
yes,
kids right now and for
absolutely.
myself, because I'm not well. I got 7 hours the night, no, 6 hours, right, 6 hours the night before, and I got a little food in at the end of the day. I went on an ATV drive with, you know who, and it was wonderful, and we just blasted music, worship music, and we didn't sing our hearts out, and then I was able to eat when I got home a little bit of food, the most I've been able to eat probably all week. And I got a little bit of strength back where I was able to
Okay.
walk, not like, because I was,
Yeah, you
I was
were very,
really
very weak, you
struggling.
said. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I can't, so anyways, I'm trying to focus, but my goal is that everybody, people are, my coaches here are saying, make sure you take care of yourself so that you can make good decisions for, your kids. And so
Yeah.
I'm doing that. And so I don't know how to be there for you entirely and all this. And so
No,
I,
that's totally fine, honey.
oh,
I'll be fine. The
okay,
kids need you. So
okay, I know.
but I do appreciate you taking my calls because that's very encouraging to me just to hear your voice and
Okay.
I want you to know I think about your sweet laugh all the time. Now, are the kids doing well?
From what I hear, they are doing good.
That's good. Well,
Yeah, yeah, I don't
yeah,
know
yeah. No,
what
it's
you know, but
I yeah. I've not talked to Travis yet, but I will.
When you keep reading through those messages, the tone doesn't suddenly shift, it slowly deepens. The longer the conversations go on, the more you start to notice how carefully everything is being handled, almost like every word carries weight beyond just a normal family exchange. And that's where things begin to feel more layered, because it's not just about what's being said anymore, it's about what's being avoided. Inside those emails, Joseph repeatedly mentions being in isolation, confirming that he's spending nearly all day alone, only getting out for about an hour. That kind of setup isn't random. In situations like this, especially when someone is both high profile and facing allegations involving a minor, detention facilities often separate them for safety reasons. It's not just about discipline, it's about protection. People charged with crimes involving children are often at the lowest level socially inside jail, and the risk of being targeted is very real. So while isolation might sound extreme, in many cases it's actually meant to keep someone from being harmed. At the same time, Joseph's messages show him trying to adapt to that environment mentally. He talks about reading religious texts, focusing on specific chapters, and using that as a way to stay grounded. This isn't just a passing mention, it becomes a consistent theme. Nearly every exchange circles back to faith, scripture, or encouragement rooted in belief. That tells you something about how he's choosing to frame his situation internally. Whether that's genuine coping or a way to maintain control over the narrative is something people can interpret differently, but the pattern is clearly there. What's equally interesting is how the rest of the family responds. Instead of pushing for details or questioning anything directly, most of their messages stay in a very specific lane: support, encouragement, and reminders to be cautious. One of the clearest examples comes from a message that explicitly warns him not to discuss anything legal unless an attorney is present. That's not casual advice. That's the kind of instruction you give when you fully understand that every word could be used in court. And that idea keeps coming up again and again. These conversations are not private. Every email, every call, every message is recorded, stored, and potentially reviewed by prosecutors. That changes everything. It means even emotional conversations are happening under pressure, and people are constantly filtering themselves, deciding what they can and can't say. So when you read these exchanges, you're not just reading raw emotion, you're reading emotion that's been carefully managed. Then there's the dynamic between Joseph and Kendra, which becomes more revealing the more you look at it closely. On the surface, it's a supportive relationship. They express love, reassurance, and a desire to stay connected despite the situation. But underneath that, there's a clear imbalance in what each of them is dealing with. Kendra isn't just supporting her husband, she's also facing her own legal issues in Arkansas while trying to take care of their children at the same time. In one of the conversations, it becomes clear that her focus has shifted almost entirely to the kids. She talks about needing to prioritize them, about not being able to fully be there emotionally for Joseph, and about how overwhelming everything has become. That's a very real moment, and it breaks away from the more controlled tone seen elsewhere. For a second, it feels less filtered and more honest, like someone trying to hold everything together while things are falling apart around them. At the same time, Joseph seems to accept that shift. He reassures her, tells her to focus on the children, and doesn't push back. On one level, that shows understanding, but on another, it also highlights how separate their realities have become. He's inside, dealing with isolation and legal uncertainty, while she's outside, managing the consequences in real time. Another layer that stands out is how the extended family steps in. According to the messages, different members of the family take on specific roles, some helping with the children, others handling legal coordination, and some offering emotional support. It's described almost like a system where everyone has a part to play. That level of organization suggests this isn't the first time they've had to navigate something complex or public. But what really makes people pause is the tone some family members use when talking about the situation itself. Instead of outright denying the allegations, some messages lean toward language about mistakes, forgiveness, and consequences. That's a subtle but important distinction. It doesn't sound like a family completely rejecting what's being said. It sounds more like a family trying to reconcile it within their belief system. There's one moment in particular that stands out, where the situation is framed not as something to fight publicly, but something to endure and grow from spiritually. That kind of framing can be interpreted in different ways. For some, it might reflect faith and resilience. For others, it might raise questions about whether there's an acceptance of what actually happened. And then you have the involvement of other relatives, including in-laws, who reach out with messages that are both supportive and cautious. One message emphasizes love and support, but immediately follows it with a reminder not to discuss details over monitored communication. Another focuses on helping Kendra specifically, acknowledging that she's the one carrying the immediate burden on the outside. All of this builds a picture that feels very different from what people are used to seeing publicly. Instead of a single, unified front, you're seeing a network of individuals responding in slightly different ways, some leaning into faith, some focusing on logistics, and others quietly acknowledging the seriousness of what's happening. And the more you sit with these messages, the clearer it becomes that this isn't just about one case or one set of charges. It's about how an entire family navigates a situation where legal reality, personal belief, and public image are all colliding at the same time. As you move further into these exchanges, the focus quietly shifts again, not in a dramatic way, but in a way that starts to reveal how differently each person within the family is processing what's happening. And this is where things become even more telling, because the consistency you might expect from such a tightly connected family isn't fully there anymore.
One of the most revealing parts comes through the involvement of extended family members, especially those who aren't directly tied to the legal situation but are still deeply connected to it. When someone from within the family reaches out, the message is supportive, but there's also a noticeable boundary. The tone is careful, almost measured, as if they're choosing every word with intention. They express love, they offer help, but they also make it clear that certain topics won't be discussed through messages like these. That balance between emotional support and controlled communication says a lot about how seriously they're taking the situation. At the same time, there are subtle differences in how people refer to what's happened. Some messages lean heavily into faith, describing the situation in terms of human weakness, sin, and redemption. That kind of language doesn't directly address the allegations, it reframes them. Instead of focusing on legal guilt or innocence, it shifts the conversation toward personal failure and spiritual recovery. And while that may be consistent with their belief system, it also changes how the situation is being understood within the family itself. but not everyone speaks in exactly the same way. There are moments where the tone feels more grounded in reality, where the seriousness of the accusations isn't softened as much. In those instances, you can sense a different kind of reaction, one that acknowledges the weight of what's being alleged without immediately trying to reframe it. It's subtle, but it creates a contrast that's hard to miss once you notice it. Another important detail comes from how they talk about the future. There's an underlying expectation in some of these messages that the legal outcome may not be favorable. Instead of discussing strategies for proving innocence, the focus shifts toward preparing for consequences, enduring hardship, and finding a way to move forward regardless of the outcome. That kind of mindset doesn't come out of nowhere. It suggests that, at least privately, there's an awareness of how serious the situation truly is. Then there's the role of the parents, particularly Jim Bob Duggar, whose message stands out more than almost anything else. His words don't follow the typical public approach of distancing or neutrality. Instead, he speaks directly about terrible decisions and a long road ahead, while still expressing love and support. It's a deeply personal message, but it also carries an implicit acknowledgement that something has gone wrong in a significant way. What makes that even striking is how he balances that acknowledgement with faith-based reassurance. He talks about forgiveness, about biblical figures who made mistakes and were redeemed, and about enduring whatever comes next. It's not a denial, it's more like an attempt to place the situation within a framework they understand. And for many observers, that raises an important question. Does this reflect belief in his son's guilt, or simply a way of coping with uncertainty?
At the same time, there's strong support directed toward Kendra Duggar. Multiple messages emphasize helping her, protecting her, and even questioning why she's facing charges at all. That contrast is important. While Joseph's situation is framed as something he may have to endure personally, Kendra's is often described as something that might be unfair or misunderstood. That difference in tone suggests that the family may be viewing the two situations very differently, even though they're legally connected. There's also a practical side to all of this that becomes clearer as you read on. The family isn't just offering emotional support, they're actively stepping in to manage responsibilities, from taking care of the children to handling business matters and coordinating legal help. It's described almost like a coordinated effort. Everyone has a role and everything is being managed collectively. That level of involvement shows how seriously they're treating the situation, but it also highlights how much is at stake beyond just the legal case itself. And then there's one more layer that starts to emerge, the idea of perception. Even though these are private communications, there's still an awareness that they could become public. That awareness shapes how people express themselves. You don't see explosive reactions or unfiltered emotion. Instead, everything feels contained, almost disciplined. It's as if the family is navigating not just a legal crisis, but also the possibility of public scrutiny at every step. When you put all of this together, it becomes clear that this isn't just a straightforward situation where everyone is reacting the same way. It's a complex mix of belief, loyalty, caution, and quiet acknowledgement. Some are leaning fully into faith, others are focusing on practical support, and a few seem to be grappling more directly with the reality of what's being alleged. And the more these layers unfold, the more the situation shifts from being just a legal case into something much broader, a moment that's testing not just one individual, but the entire structure of how this family operates, communicates, and understands itself under pressure. As everything continues to unfold through these messages, what really starts to stand out isn't just what each person is saying, it's how all of it fits together when you look at it as one complete picture. Because by this point, you're no longer just seeing individual reactions, you're seeing a system at work, a family trying to hold itself together while dealing with something that's clearly far more serious than anything they faced publicly before. One of the most telling aspects is how acceptance quietly weaves its way into the conversations, not in a direct or explicit way, but in the kind of language people use when they talk about consequences, about enduring difficult years ahead, and about preparing for what's coming rather than fighting against it. That shift in tone is subtle, but it changes everything. It moves the focus away from questioning the allegations and toward figuring out how to live with whatever happens next. At the center of all this is still Joseph Duggar, whose own words reflect a kind of internal adjustment to his situation. He talks about accepting where he is, about trying to find purpose even while being confined, and about leaning fully into faith as a way to cope. There's a moment where he references biblical figures who endured hardship, almost drawing a parallel between their experiences and his own. That kind of thinking suggests he's not just reacting emotionally, he's actively reframing his situation in a way that makes it more bearable. But at the same time, there are contradictions that don't fully resolve. In some parts of the communication, there's language that sounds like accountability, references to mistakes, to sin, to needing forgiveness. In other moments, there are hints of resistance, like pushing back against lies or questioning what's being said. Those two ideas don't sit comfortably together, and that tension becomes one of the most interesting parts of the entire situation. It leaves open the question of whether he's fully accepting responsibility or still trying to reconcile his version of events with what's being alleged. Meanwhile, on the outside, Kendra Duggar is navigating a completely different kind of reality. Her messages show someone who is trying to stay strong, but also someone who is clearly overwhelmed. She talks about focusing on the children, about struggling to balance everything, and about needing to take care of herself just to function day to day. There's a moment where she openly admits she can't be fully present for him right now, and that honesty cuts through the otherwise controlled tone of the conversations. That contrast between their two experiences becomes one of the defining elements of the story. He's in a confined environment, dealing with isolation and uncertainty, while she's outside, dealing with immediate responsibilities, legal pressure, and emotional strain all at once. Even though they're communicating regularly, they're essentially living in two completely different worlds. At the same time, the family continues to operate as a support system, but by now it feels more structured than emotional. Roles are clearly defined. Some people are helping with the children, others are handling logistics, and others are offering spiritual guidance. It's efficient, almost organized to a fault, and while that can be seen as strength, it also reinforces the idea that this isn't a temporary disruption. This is something they're preparing to manage long term. What also becomes clearer toward the end is how much of this is being processed through belief rather than direct confrontation. Instead of openly dissecting what happened or discussing evidence, the conversations repeatedly return to themes of faith, redemption, and endurance. That doesn't necessarily answer any of the questions surrounding the case, but it does show how the family is choosing to cope with it internally. And then there's the broader implication of all these messages becoming public. Even though they were written in a controlled environment, likely with some awareness that they could be seen later, they still reveal far more than any public statement ever could. Not because of dramatic confessions or shocking revelations, but because of the consistency in tone, the patterns in language, and the way different people approach the same situation from slightly different angles. When you step back and look at everything together, the isolation, the careful communication, the emotional strain, the structured support system, and the underlying tension between acceptance and denial, it paints a picture that feels much more real than anything presented on the surface. It's not clean, it's not perfectly aligned, and it doesn't offer easy answers. Instead, it shows what happens when a family known for control and consistency is faced with something that can't be easily managed or explained away. And in that sense, these messages don't just tell you about one case, they give you a rare look into how people respond when their private reality no longer matches the image they've spent years building.